Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this, the community conversation. We've not really done one in this format for ever such a long time. This is sort of general questions and answers. We want to hear from you. Hopefully you want to hear from us. There have been loads of questions submitted. First rule of these sorts of meetings is to ask, can you hear me at the back? Yes, is the answer, which is coming through loud and clear. So that's splendid. Now, some small housekeeping matters, if we can. This is a hybrid meeting. We are embracing technology at a rate of knots at the council. So there are people listening in at home and joining us on Teams. You can see that there are screens with questions which have been submitted, which are all terribly good. Should there be, we are not expecting to have a fire. You may be thinking differently, but we're not expecting to have a fire this evening. So if there is a fire, then you can find fire exits at the rear of the building and also here and, well, not there, here and there at the rear. So there we are. We have over 30 pre-submitted questions to go through, and these have been loaded into the Slido platform, which you can see on the screens. And as you may expect, we've had a number of similar questions sort of lumped together. So we'll try and take them as much as possible together. So we'll combine them to draw together a theme rather than having 8 separate questions about wheelie bins or stuff like that, which will become terribly tiresome. If you're in the room, you can access Slido using your phone, using the QR codes, which are around the room, little bits of paper with a sort of a square thing. Thank you very much. You can access that. And if you're at home, the link to this is in the Teams chat. So please take a moment to look through the questions. Give a thumbs up if you can, and this will bump popular questions to the top of the list. I'm trying to avoid that, actually, because otherwise I'll get the complaints. So somebody that put their question in at number 4 suddenly finds that they're question number 16 and they're waiting all evening. So maybe ignore that. We're making this up. You know, this is still very much a work in progress. Please continue to use Slido to ask additional questions. And every now and again, from my pre-submitted questions here, I will take a break and go to the Slido deck. But please try and use it if you can. So if you'd like to ask your question in person, please make sure you put your name when you submit the question so that I can then say, Mrs. Hargreaves wishes to ask a question, and then we will call you and somebody will rush around with a roving microphone so that you can ask it. If you don't want to ask your question in person, please submit on Slido as anonymous and we will make sure that it gets read out for you. Now, we're going to try and do our best to get through as many questions as we possibly can. We do need to finish at 8:45 at the latest, and any questions that are not responded to will be followed up via email with a full written answer for you. So don't worry, if you don't get to ask it in person, you will get an answer nevertheless. So this event is to address primarily borough-wide ideas and issues. We want to avoid getting into too much detail about specific areas, but it's very difficult to avoid that at times. So we'll try as much as we can to accommodate area-specific questions, but we're trying to make this a sort of a borough-wide way of dealing with things. So if your question is too specific for the meeting, and there's really, if it's very niche, you know, how can I get the road sign that, you know, Acacia Gardens, Barnes replaced with something more pretty, you'll just get an answer to that by email, because the majority of people, whilst it's fascinating, might not necessarily want to come here to listen to that. Okay, so the final reminder that the event is being recorded. So if we can avoid swearing, and that's primarily a reminder for the panel, then that will be lovely. And now I will quickly give an introduction to the panel members. We have, starting right over there, we have Councillor Penny Frost, who is the chair of the Education and Children's Services Committee. Councillor Phil Giesler, who is our spokesperson for Business and Growth. Councillor Alex Amon, chair of the Transport and Air Quality Committee. Councillor Julia Needham-Watts, she is deputy leader and chair of the Environment, Sustainability, Culture and Sport Committee. Councillor Jim Mellard, also deputy leader, spokesperson for housing. Councillor Piers Allen, chair of the Adult Social Care, Health and Housing Services Committee. Councillor Robin Brown, finance lead member, and Councillor Nancy Baldwin, spokesperson for communities, equalities and the voluntary sector. And having introduced all of them, my name is Councillor Gareth Roberts. I'm the leader of the council and I'm your chair for this evening. So shall we get on with actually doing some work rather than just listening to me? Yes, shall we? So the first question, this is submitted by Leslie Norris. At first, you're going to think that this is something for Alex, but actually it's for Robin because it falls under the customer services angle. So is Leslie Norris here? Excellent. Would you like to ask your question yourself? I have it here. I'll refresh your memory. What is the timing / process for issuing PCNs, parking tickets to you and me? Is the council considering digital brackets emails and texts to prevent issues caused by delays in the post, which we're all experiencing at the moment? Robin Brown.
Thank you. Is that working? It seems to be working. Thank you, Leslie, for the question. Actually, there's quite a lot of statutory regulation around how PCNs are issued, so we have to follow these government guidelines, which means that we do issue the notices by first class post, so they do have to go out first class. A lot of the process is automated, so notices are processed and issued within a couple of days by the council. They must be issued within 14 days of the offence, so in most cases we're exceeding good practice there. However, as has been pointed out, we are rather than at the mercy of the Royal Mail in terms of when they actually get delivered. The PCNs are issued to the registered keeper of the vehicle. Now, we have to get that information from the DVLA, and the DVLA provide us with the postal addresses of the registered keeper, but they do not retain email or phone numbers for these purposes. So it would not be possible for the council to contact drivers in this way. And the answer here points out that many PCNs are, of course, issued to drivers who are not Richmond upon Thames residents. So currently, the regulations require us to notify by post in that way, and therefore we can't choose to do anything differently, even if we were able to, unfortunately.
Leslie. For those of you who didn't hear, can you just give us the gist again, Leslie, because there's now a mic. Ah.
Basically, but it didn't. So by then, he did. And interesting to the doctors. On the street, it has two panels on it. So that on the next page, then you might understand the principle. Basically, two panels.
Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from on that one. It's a tough one. Robin, any further?
Well, I think Leslie and I may have corresponded about this particular subject in the past in my ward councillor capacity, Leslie. And as we know, it is the slightly infamous Burton's Road, which was caught catching out your husband, which did go round with the officers, and they did explain why there need to be two cameras and two sort of fining points on that particular street. But clearly, I can understand the frustration. I can only say that I have been assured that things do go out first class. I've got no reason to believe they don't. But clearly, anywhere near Christmas, people are still getting Christmas cards in the middle of January. So it was a bit of a nightmare over that period of time, I think, and that's perhaps what's happened.
It is something which I'm sure we'll keep under review, but we are bound by statutes, by law, in how we issue PCNs. And unfortunately, at the moment, the Royal Mail's a basket case. But we will do what we can to try and improve the service so that people don't get caught out in the future. And I'm sure that what I would suggest to anybody that does feel that they have been unfairly issued a PCN is to write to the council including your ward councillors in, because we're not heartless ghouls, you know. If something looks wrong, then we will do our best to be decent and you know, treat people with a fair hand, particularly if it's around Christmas and obviously the whole of the postal service is up on block. So we'll keep on it. Next question. This is a question which has been raised by more than one person. So what I'm going to do is read it out because it's a thematic one, and I'm going to put this over to Julia Leeds and Watts. Oh yes.
Okay.
Yes. So this is a question which comes into two parts. It's been submitted by Patricia. The genesis of this particular question, Patricia Morgan, Robert Blakeborough, Caroline Sheehan and Tim Harrington all asked about this broad theme. So the first part of the question is, what is being done to tackle flooding and sewage going into rivers, and how can we help drainage, such as paved over driveways and more trees and greenery? Part one.
Okay, thank you. Chair of the Environment, I'm going to take this one. What is being done to tackle flooding? Quite a lot. We're currently consulting on our local flood risk management strategy. That consultation runs until 3rd of May, and all your views are very welcome in that consultation. Can you just put the question again?
Well, that question was about paved over driveways, trees and greenery, and then we'll move on to weather wardens. Okie
dokie. So paved over driveways are very much an issue of concern at the moment, and unfortunately local authorities' powers are limited because there's quite a lot that people can do under permitted development. If a driveway conversion requires planning permission, then the local authority can specify materials and make sure that it's done in a permeable way, encourage greenery and so on, but we're limited in our powers. So my thinking on that is that we need to perhaps do a little bit more in terms of softer engagement with residents, talk to residents associations like I did just at the weekend in my local area, to engage them and make all of us realise that what we do on our own property collectively has a big impact on what happens in our streets in terms of surface water flooding. That is, of course, linked with the issue of sewerage and the capacity of our sewerage system not being adequate for taking in the increasingly intense rainfall that we're experiencing. So we're not alone as an authority in needing to tackle these things. We do work with Thames Water in partnership on schemes, and on that note, on Thames Water, you will all, of course, be aware of the abstraction scheme at Teddington to take water from the River Thames. The council put in quite a robust response to that, and we took that as an opportunity to also refer to some of these other issues that Thames Water could really be doing more to help us with locally on surface water. I'm going to pause there because I could go on for about an hour and a half, and I just want to see if there's any sort of interactivity and response on that, or if you want to direct me a little bit more to the specifics of what your query is, if that's okay.
Well, if any of the people who asked the original question, so that's Patricia Morgan, Robert Blakeborough, Caroline Sheehan or Tim Harrington are in the room, that gentleman there, Robert. Mr. Blakeman, excellent.
We're talking about clearing out gully plots. Everything else is repeated flooding in certain areas, probably because the drain is blocked, but it's cleared, goes away from it and then gets blocked in.
Yeah, okay, so that's a very valid and related area. We had a new street cleansing contract start at the beginning of 2022, in which we were aware of the issue of block gullies and needing to put more effort into clearing those. We've been monitoring that much more closely now because we're not entirely satisfied that we're getting quite what we wanted under that contract. We've got a new assistant director in that area of the council with a very positive attitude to making sure that our monitoring is up to scratch, and we'll be looking at that contract and making sure that we're doing what we can to make sure that the efforts in gully emptying are going where they're needed. Sometimes it's a question of the gully not being cleaned. Sometimes it's a question that it might have a plastic bottle stuck in it, which was the case in Teddington recently. Sometimes it's a question that it's not actually blocked, it's clean, it's been attended and it's flowing well, but the capacity simply isn't big enough to cope with rainfall after heavy rainfall.
So how often are they getting cleared?
The standard should be once per year with a higher frequency for troublesome gullies, which we're plotting out. Another aspect of that is that we are...
What is the actual frequency of being cleared?
I don't have that in front of me. I'm happy to follow that up afterwards. I just wanted to add that the other approach we're taking is to, where we can, deploy sensors which pick up on sort of unexpected levels in gully pots, which assist with deploying the cleansing and the unblocking where it's needed.
Just as, and I will come to you in a moment, madam, because this may be of use and as a follow-up, is that another question which has been asked regarding this is whether the council would consider creating a volunteer weather warden network, so weather wardens in your local areas, and these volunteers could be empowered to clear drains and gutters ahead of large rainfalls, clear snowfall and clear small branches after storms. So that might be something to consider while we ask that lady who had her hand up in the second row just behind Margie. That's the lady there with the green scarf. You may have something to add.
Yeah, my name's Patricia Morgan. I was one of those. Sideways, particularly in the way. Just take paving in so much area, so there's no slope. Right, that's going to add to the. I don't know if anything can be done about fashion for this.
Yeah, and apologies if I wasn't clear when I mentioned driveways earlier. I was meaning the paving over a front garden.
There's no cars even to park.
Yeah, it's a maintenance question. It's a cultural.
Bills, you know, there's only one.
Yes, I completely agree with you, and we need to work out a way to engage better with people so they understand that what is lost when you pave over your front garden is biodiversity, it's drainage, the soak away that you're talking about, it's the amenity of everybody in the street, it's an increase in the heat island effect. We're getting increasingly long, intense periods of hot sun, and every piece of vegetation helps to address that. Increasingly, it's not just what you might think of as an environment problem, it's a health issue as well. And I couldn't agree with you more strongly that we need collectively to do something about that and green our areas, and that includes every property that we own.
Okay. Okay. I understand that there is a problem with the microphone, so when somebody asks a question in the room, I'm going to repeat it, which is going to be terribly tiresome for everybody, but the people at home can't hear what the question is. So that's why I'm parroting away. Before we bring this gentleman in, but you can give him the microphone. Weather wardens?
Oh, yes, actually, I'm very taken with this idea. Obviously, the devil is in the detail and you need to get the right sort of volunteer. But in a sort of parallel idea that we have at the moment is a borough street tree champion approach, encouraging people to think about street trees and understand why they're important. And I think that perhaps there is something there that we can look at. Whoever raised that, I would encourage you to put that in as a response to the local flood risk management consultation, if you can, and then maybe that can be taken forward by officers as an idea to explore.
Excellent. Gentleman with the microphone.
Yes, hello. Just to follow up on that point about soakaways, our house was built with a soakaway, take the roof drainage into the garden, not down the drain. Is it a way of encouraging people to fit those retrospectively and or require new developments to have them as a standard?
Okay, for those people listening at home, that was a question about whether it's possible to make a requirement or an encouragement of people to use roof guttering soakaway into the front garden as a requirement for all new builds and possibly existing builds.
Yeah, well, certainly if you put a planning application in over a certain size, then that sort of thing would be expected as part of it. But that is over a certain size, and perhaps that wouldn't, you wouldn't go into that detail for a householder application. And in any case, householder development, if you like, is often permitted development, and therefore the council doesn't have a say in how people do things in their back garden. But I think, again, that comes back to that, nonetheless, engaging with residents so that they understand what they can do that can make things a bit better and what they perhaps should avoid to make things worse. So avoid hard paving, but put in a sustainable drainage system, if you like. I mean, you know, at the very least, put in a water butt so that you can then water your garden, and that in effect it's a sort of manual soakaway. But I think this is very much something that can feed into if you like, a toolkit of assistance that the council can provide as information through our website, perhaps an interactive toolkit. We're looking at something very much like that for energy efficiency measures. So perhaps there is, you know, subsequently something we can do on water efficiency measures, for want of a better term. But that's an interesting thought. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Different subject now. We've had a question in from Jenny Vian, who was asking about a specific school admissions policy. However, it's an interesting enough question for it to be made a bit more general. So I will ask this one of Councillor Frost, and it's does this council set the rules for school acceptance?
Okay, thank you. Now, before I talk specifically about siblings, I'll just very briefly explain how schools operate these days, because there have been a lot of changes over the past few years. Now, there was a time when all our schools would have been maintained schools. Now, many, well, all of our secondary schools are either church schools or academies, and so they would look to their diocese or look to their academy group to, you know, for the specifics of how they manage their all of their arrangements. Most or many of our primary schools are still maintained schools, and so they have a sort of direct relationship really with the local authority, and our local authority, the services of Education Children's Services, are delivered through Achieving for Children. So that just sort of gives you an indication of the complexity of the landscape these days in education. But in terms of criteria for admissions, all schools would have some policy towards sibling admission. And the reason for this is partly the logistics of ensuring that, you know, parents can deliver their children, you know, safely on time to a particular school. And when a younger sibling joins the school, they're joining a school where they're already, the family's already known, they know the layout of the school, they recognise the uniform, and they feel more comfortable. So there's a lot of very good reasons for having sibling rules. Now, sometimes people think, well, it's all very well, but, you know, there's a family, they move into the area, they get their child in, and they move out again, but the second child can come in, and it's as if they're leapfrogging over the other families.
Sorry about that.
So this has been looked at in detail by a previous admissions forum. Now, admissions forum is made up of members, head teachers, diocesan representatives, and so forth. And they did actually find, when they looked at this question, that very few families do move further away once they've secured admission for their eldest child. Also, of course, it is actually quite difficult trying to put conditions onto criteria for admissions, because you're in the situation that each school will have, a varied catchment. And so if you say, well, the sibling can only get in if the family live, 1 kilometre away from the school, then what happens to that family who like just 1 kilometre and a little bit away? They could see that as being very unfair. So the sibling criteria, that if you've got one child currently at the school, not if your child has been at the school and has left, but if that child is currently at the school, then younger siblings will be able to join the school as well. They will have precedence over other children joining through the normal admission arrangements.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I understand that there are hands raised on Teams. No? Just check. Oh, there we go. There are no hands raised. I understand incorrectly, which is often the case. So thank you very much for that. If I could ask colleagues to be a bit brisk with their answers. I mean, it's great that we've got knowledgeable people on the panel, but if a little learning is a dangerous thing, think how much damage a lot of it can do. So we'll be keeping answers slightly brisker so we can get through more questions. But the next one is to Robin Brown, and it comes from Gillian Carrick. Is Gillian Carrick here? Gillian Carrick is here.
I have amnesia about exactly what I asked you, but I know it focused on her, and it was actually cattle.
It may be a different Gillian Carrick.
Is that okay? And I have spoken to Phil about this, and he's been great. So I just think, I don't know who the contractors are exactly, but I wonder if they could maybe be a bit more thorough and perhaps have a feeling of investment in keeping our streets litter free. And I should say I live in Teddington, and I love the area, and I feel a bit of a stakeholder keeping it looking very nice.
Thank you. Well, you're getting thumbs up here. And I will ask Julia to address the issue of littering, and then we'll move straight into Robin Brown, because possibly a different Gillian Carrick. As Richmond Council is working in partnership with Wandsworth, how is it that the latter is not increasing the council tax at all, whereas Richmond's council tax is rising considerably? That was also you as well.
You do, that's a much better question.
Do you want that one? Okay, we'll do that one. Robin.
Thank you, Gillian, for your second question. So the question about the comparison between Richmond's council tax and Wandsworth council tax does come up quite often, so thank you for raising it. Just a quick correction to start with. Council tax bills increased by 5.9% in Richmond this year and by 5.6% in Wandsworth. So they did go up in Wandsworth. And that's because both councils have no choice but to apply the GLA precept, which went up by the London Mayor increased that by 9.7%. And both councils also added an adult social care precept of 2%. So the thing that was different was that Richmond increased its core council tax by 2.99%, whereas that was frozen in Wandsworth. So there was a difference, but actually council tax went up in both. We'd rather not be increasing council tax, but we do recognise with the cost of living pressures, it is going to be very difficult for some households. So we offer quite a lot of support. We've got a council tax reduction scheme for the poorest households in the borough, up to 100% discount. Hardship funding is available, and we have fuel grants over the winter. But inflation is running at over 10%, and demand for our core social services is continuing to increase. So we have to think about longer term what we're doing. Compared to Wandsworth, we have very different levels of funding that is outside council tax. So in Richmond, we get no general government grant. We get £24 million from rates and £9 million from parking. In Wandsworth, the equivalent figures are £24 million general government grant, 79 million from rates, and 32 million from parking. So there's a difference there of about 100 million of that non-council tax funding for Wandsworth. So it's not the case that Wandsworth have got a magic formula for delivering fantastic public services at a much lower cost. They're just funded differently.
There we go. There's a later. I was wondering if there would be follow-ups on council tax, because I would be astonished. Oh, this is not about council tax. Is it something entirely different? Do go ahead.
Litter.
Oh, litter. There we go.
So I'm on Nella Road in Witton, and we've actually set up our own Nella Road tidy team.
Excellent.
So there's 8 of us pairs every 2 weeks. Grabbers, hoops, and we go out and one of us picks up general rubbish and the other one picks up recycling. Of that responsibility. That seems to be.
You certainly can respond to that.
I think that does deserve a response, and I just wanted to ask if you had bags that you can use, because if not, we can get you bags to help with that. I was out with my ward colleagues in Twickenham and Riverside on Sunday. That's James Chard and Stephen O'Shea. We went out and did a very similar thing around Holly Road and Garfield Road, where we've got a little pocket park. And it's amazing the number of beer cans and bottles you find in the shrubbery. And some of those items are things that won't get picked up by the collection crews, but they can be put through our recycling systems, through our on-street recycle bins. And it really makes a difference to how things look. And it's also a good sort of community cohesion approach. We're doing litter picks in some of our parks with people who are living with dementia as well. And that community cohesion aspect is really important. Whilst I'm saying this, I'm also thinking, as you probably are, yeah, but what's the council doing? The council should be doing this. And indeed, it is up to us to make sure we're monitoring our contractors properly. And I talked a little bit about that earlier and how we're trying to do that. I wonder if in Teddington, some of that is about the flats and residences above shops or premises on the high street that are putting waste out in black sacks that then gets attacked by animals sometimes. And we're also looking at ways that we can tackle that. So, for example, we have a trial going on in Heath Road in Twickenham, which suffers from a similar problem, where we've got on-street lockable containers to take that waste so it won't blow around and it won't get attacked by foxes. And we need to analyse pavement widths and things like that. But that is something that we're looking at the moment. And in terms, I think there's something around the tidiness of the collection crews, I think came in as one of the points on that question. And again, that's something that I and officers are working on an ongoing basis. We recognise that we need to keep talking to collection crews so that they understand what's expected in terms of the polish of our collection rounds. We need to make sure that the rounds are balanced evenly across the days of the week so that they've got the time to get their jobs done properly. And if things don't work really well, then we've also got terms in the contract where we can take a slightly firmer approach with the contractor. So we're trying to do a lot. We're never going to please everybody, but I hope that reassures you a little bit that we do take it seriously as an issue.
Okay, I've got hands being raised. This lady here, then I see there's Mr. Rolls is wishing to ask a question. No, this lady here at the front, and then Mr. Roth. At least you get your steps in if I do it like that.
I'd like to thank you for the community involvement. I think that's laudable, but I was wondering whether the whole modern way of collecting rubbish should be reconsidered. If you think about the idea of putting paper in a very small bin and the winds that we have that blows the paper around and spreads it all over the street before the collectors have a chance to pick it up, maybe we should be considering changing the collection vessel. Going back to the more old-fashioned bigger bins with lids on, which the foxes can't get into, the wind doesn't blow them around.
Sorry.
You know, there's different ways of approaching this. I mean, you've got the paper that blows around, you've got the plastic containers that blow around, And in some places you've got food waste, which is quite disgusting. And, you know, you can't, there must be other ways of looking at it now. Maybe we need to rethink our collection process.
Thank you. For the people listening in at home, the question was effectively, can we have bigger, more fit for purpose receptacles for recycling, particularly paper and food waste?
Well, I do believe that the Assistant Director for Waste, who joined us relatively recently, is in the room, so she will no doubt be listening to this. And I think that there is there's a grain of truth in what you're saying, that containers are important in defence of the smaller boxes that we use compared to, say, the wheelie bins used in some other boroughs. They're more appropriate for people who have small front gardens or no front gardens. They are stackable, so if you've got paper in one and it's full, you can get another box from the council and put that on top. So there are ways, and also you can get a net cover to stop things blowing out. So there are ways to present such that it's less likely to blow around in the wind. But I take the point that some people don't find it ideal, and that perhaps we can think about that. But I also recognise that it would be quite a big job to change the kind of container that we currently use, which works quite well for many people. Perhaps something more tailored is appropriate. But I would also say that the sight of a street with nothing but wheelie bins on the pavement isn't good for accessibility of pavements either. So there are pros and cons, I think.
Okay, I can see 3 hands now. I can see Mr. Rolls first. So if we can keep questions, and this lady here as well. Questions short and pithy, please.
I was going to say, larger containers would also probably help increase the recycling rate. We seem to be stuck around the 40% mark. The size of the containers we give people, about 40% of the bigger containers.
Thank you. Whilst the mic moves on, if the point was just made that perhaps larger containers can assist to increase the recycling rate. Lady with the stripy jumper, and then Charlotte over there.
Hi, I just wondered if it's possible to consider a Keep Richmond Tidy quick and easy campaign, because I didn't know about the nets that you can put over the boxes, and also I do agree with residents that the streets are more disgusting. So just some sort of simple, easy campaign just to remind residents what's available, how they can get hold of it, and to be responsible with their rubbish.
Excellent. Okay, that was just a question about, can we be more proactive in communicating the idea of a Keep Richmond Tidy campaign, and how residents can avail themselves of additional methods of keeping things spick and span.
Yeah, no, I take the point that communication is invaluable. I'll put in a plug for the richmond.gov.uk website, and the waste and recycling pages there have got lots of information and lots of other links to ways to be responsible in terms of waste and recycling. So I recommend having a look there. Every now and then we do send out a flyer to stick on people's fridges, so they're aware of these things, and that has information about nets as well. An additional plug for Great Big Green Week that's coming up in June, that you might start to see more tweets about, and our various comms channel will put stuff out on that, where we're very much thinking about engaging with community organisations, with residents, with businesses to promote more responsible, more environmentally friendly behaviours. And I've just caught the eye of one of our community team who's working on that. So she's smiling. So I think I've said the right thing there.
Good, good, good. We're going to go to Charlotte Baker, and then we go to this lady here at the front.
Thanks very much. Related to the question about contractors, at Richmond Living Street, something that we're hearing is that one of the other issues, apart from the mess, is that the boxes are just left anywhere once they've been emptied over the pavement, and they pose an accessibility problem for people who maybe have reduced mobility, are trying to push a wheelchair or a buggy. And this is actually kind of, obviously the litter issue is not nice, but this is kind of an accessibility challenge, which in some ways is actually much more serious. and would be a reason I think that we would also struggle to support the idea of larger containers or bins, because lots of pavements in the borough with street furniture actually don't meet minimum requirements already for accessibility. So on bin day, it's particularly exacerbated. So, you know, when you're talking about the problems with contractors, is this accessibility issue in particular being considered, because it's really quite, you know, serious for certain groups in the borough. Thanks.
Thank you. Again, for those at home, the point was made that quite often the bin crews leave the small recycling boxes in a haphazard fashion, which you know gets in the way of people with accessibility issues. But at the same time, there is the squaring the circle of how do you make sure that those are looked after, but not go down the line of the bigger containers, which will equally cause an impediment for people with accessibility issues. Broadly it? Yes, yeah. I think so.
Thank you. And I think that was a good point to raise. As I said, there are pros and cons in any type of receptacle, but that untidiness of placement of containers once they've been emptied is absolutely something that we've been concerned about, and is something that we're taking up with the contractor under that sort of polish, and getting a pledge from them that they will be training their crews to understand why it's important to us. It's not that we're being finicky for no reason. It's about being fair and being accessible and just delivering a good service, and that's part of it. And thank you for raising that.
Thank you. Lady in the front.
Going back to finding boxes that won't scatter papers everywhere, is there any way of finding a fox-proof box that you can put cards in? Because where we live is like Gumeo Central, they hold meetings on street corners. And people put things like chicken wrappers and pizza boxes. And when the boxes go out, the boxes have a party. So if you can find something fox-proof, it would be lovely.
The question for those at home is, can we find fox-proof recycling boxes? Julia?
Again, I'd be very pleased if we could find fox-proof bins. I think that we've got different breeds of foxes in different types of the borough, because in some places the foxes seem very able to open the bins. They don't open mine. I don't know whether that's because I've got a newer bin or because I sort of wedge it in slightly. But like I say, officers at the back of the room will be listening to this and understanding what's important to our residents.
Indeed. Okay, I'm going to take one more on bins. We could be here all night. Lady with a hand raised.
It's more of a suggestion than a question. I don't know if something can be done to people don't do it already. Encourage people to work out containers, food and drink containers.
There's lots of thumbs up to this.
Which might encourage foxes more.
The thumbs up for those people at home is, what's this? Spraying with bleach. The suggestion was to encourage people to wash their containers out before putting them into recycling, indeed to even spray them with bleach. I'm assuming you mean the containers and not the foxes. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Excellent. Right, we're going to move on from bins. I'm sorry, we are going to move on from bins. That is an entirely different subject, and I will come back if we've got time. It's moving on. Listen, I stretch a point on a daily basis on a semi-professional level, but frankly, but we will try and get to line bikes if we can. Now, here we go. Shradra Bandari in the room. Is she online? She's not, so she will get a response in the usual fashion. What we'll do is we're going to mix this up a bit now. We're going to go to the, sorry, Nancy, that was Nancy's time to shine and it's been cruelly snatched away. What we're going to do is we're going to ask some of these questions here, which are on the Slido thing, just to show that we're getting the money's worth out of it. The first question is, what does the council do about people who pave over their front gardens? Well, we've done that, but then drive over the pavement illegally to park there. And that's one for Alex Aiden.
Good. So This is something we continue to look at about what the right approach to take is. The challenge, ultimately the challenge that lies here is that we know that there is, of course, a level of non-compliance going on in the borough, which we don't want to support. The challenge is that the only way to actually enforce this is to witness the movement on hand with a relevantly equipped officer to record the moment and begin enforcement proceedings. And as you'll appreciate, we don't necessarily have sufficient officers to be stood waiting at people's driveways at all hours of day. The only other real approach we can take is to get challenging in terms of the physical infrastructure on the pavement that would preclude access to these illegal driveways. And that again isn't a challenge-free approach because, of course, as I think one of the previous speakers already intimated, we have many pavements in this borough with limited widths. And of course, if you go sticking bollards and other equipment there to limit those vehicle movements, you're arguably having as much of a negative impact on the pedestrian amenity as the vehicle movements themselves. But it is something under consideration. And I think that the way that we'll move forward with this agenda is the Policy Performance and Review Board are looking at the requirements that apply to crossovers, and my committee will be making representations as part of that, then receiving their recommendations. And once we've clarified what our approach going forward is for the legal allowance of crossovers, I think we do then need to review and implement a different approach from our present non-activity really largely in this area to one of some greater activity.
Excellent. The questioner has waived their right to anonymity and wishes to follow up with a supplementary.
So that was my question, but is a photograph not enough of the car parked? Because it's obviously crossed. That's ridiculous.
British law is an arse.
Hello,
no.
Family show.
It's an acceptable term. I was referring to the animal. In the sense that I think British law, or English law, I should say, at least cannot make the assumption that because the vehicle's on the driveway that it hasn't been helicoptered. I'm being facetious, but hasn't been helicoptered to the site. You have to demonstrate the actual act of breaching the pavement illegally. You can't assume that that is the means by which it got there.
Yep.
I think because we're having so many CPZs now, that people are going to just do that. They're just going to pave over their front gardens, and then obviously with all the environmental problems, and there's absolutely nothing we can do to stop them doing that.
Personally, I think that's white. My steer, not wishing to be overly suggestive to the Policy Performance and Review Board's recommendations they make, but my personal preference is that we make sure that we've hit the right, and I suspect probably a slightly lower threshold for what is required in terms of legal crossovers. And we also look at how we make sure they're done well so that we don't have the ecosystem negative impacts that have been referred to earlier from mass paving over front gardens. But if we enable more people in legitimate places to have legal crossovers and find ways of also supporting them, one of the things I personally want us to look at is whether or not we can offer instalment payments for those works, because they're actually quite expensive works in many cases. To try and make sure that people are helped to do the right thing, we can lessen the amount of illegal crossovers there are in the borough.
Sorry, I'll just ask one more thing about that because I'm very anti-driveways. It's against the local plan. Richmond's local plan is against crossovers and front garden paving. So why would we want to do
Well,
that?
as I say, we're evaluating whether or not we've got the balance right. My personal view on behalf of the Transport Brief is part of the way that we solve the proliferation of illegal crossovers is to make sure that it's easier for people to do the right thing, as long as we do it in a way that supports some of the other priorities we have around supporting surface water drainage and general improvement in ecosystems.
I know. It's a circle which will never be squared. I'm going to move on to get somebody else up on stage for a bit. So I'm going to leapfrog over the Waldegrave Road parking thing just for the moment and move to what's happening on the future of high streets and what's being done about Richmond town centre and protecting small businesses from being taken over by big companies. Now, nobody better placed to answer this than Phil Giesler, who is our spokesperson for business and growth. Phil.
Thanks very much, Gareth. I mean, this area of particularly on high streets and town centres came up quite a lot in the community conversations, I think 2 years ago. And, you know, a lot of concerns about local provision, support to small businesses, the importance of greening our high streets as well. So a number of areas were raised. And in fact, I think since then, we're actually doing quite a lot of different initiatives now to help rebuild our high streets. One of the most significant is we've put together a public realm improvement fund, which we've invested £3 million into. And we're taking a number of areas that are deemed to be high priority. I'll highlight Teddington Broad Streets. We're looking at Ham Parade, even over at Powder Mill Road, and some new areas we're also looking at in East Sheen as well, around Milestone Green and the library area. What we're doing with designers and architects is to look at how we can improve those public realms. So can we green them? Can we increase paving? Can we basically make them much more friendly to pedestrians and to shop users? And it's been quite a lot of work. We've had to do quite a lot of work to understand what's actually underneath the pavements in these areas, but we're about to launch a number of consultations over the next 3 months, I think, in all of the areas that I've actually mentioned. So that's one of the areas that's quite exciting to us. We've done quite a lot to help our small businesses, both in terms of our Shop Local campaign, where we've been running in a variety of town centres this year in association with the local retail associations, campaigns that really bring the pride of the local shops to life in places like Hampton Wick and in East Sheen, which have, I think, been very, very well received. So there's a couple of things there. We're also doing much more in the way of events as well at the moment. So clearly we're helping and sponsoring with our business improvement districts, the High Tide Festival. We're laying on more Christmas events as well. So a variety of things that we're doing. And just final thing to mention on that is people talked about Richmond Town Centre, and we do realise that Richmond Town Centre is one of those areas that's quite a complicated initiative for us to manage. It's a big shopping centre. It's got a lot of heritage assets as well. It's got quite a lot of traffic issues. And we've agreed as a group to basically take a much more systematic long-term look at Richmond Town Centre and what we want to do with it in the future. So a big engagement exercise is about to commence on that area as well. So quite a lot of areas where we would, but really picking up from the last community conversation to put a number of initiatives on the ground.
Excellent. I can see a hand raised there. Was this your original question, madam? No, never mind, but you can still go ahead.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions, really. In Broad Street, I was speaking to some people who worked at that sweatshop, and they said they had to close down because the charity that took over, British Heart Foundation, got a better deal with the landlord, and they just couldn't compete on rent price. I'd just like to know, is that true? Because then it's very unfair on the actual businesses. We have a lot of charity shops in Teddington.
Yeah, we do. Absolutely. Yeah.
And the second question is sort of partly to do with parking again, but we have some local businesses on, say, Waldegrave Road, on Stanley Road, and they suffer from not having any, again, parking for local for shoppers who want to swing by and just do a quick shop. Is there any thought to how we can support those businesses?
So just to answer your first question, I mean, I think that obviously one of the issues we face is that we don't have a lot of control in terms of rents and what rental rates have changed. A lot of our, in fact, in doing some of the work on Broad Street and other areas, we've come to realise some of the strange ownership structures that there are on our buildings and our shops, and it's very difficult for us to control. That said, I think it's important to look at the balance. I think you're right. I mean, there has been a bit of a concern about Broad Street in terms of charity shops, but conversely, there's also been some good investment. So with people like Planet Organics coming in recently as well. And indeed, in many parts of our borough, I noticed there was one point about vacancy rates. I mean, yes, we've had some areas where vacancy rates have gone up, but in other areas, actually, they've come down recently as well. So it's very variable what we see. So there's a limited amount that we can do when it comes to that. But of course, we are always looking where we possibly can to work with landlords. The second area, which Councillor Amon may want to also deal with, is one of the things we've been looking at in terms of, as we put in more controlled parking, is to try and get the balance right between parking available for residents and for businesses. And in fact, in a couple of areas, we've actually as we've introduced schemes, we've had to rejig the balance in a couple of areas in order to make sure that we can ensure we support local businesses, and we're always looking, and those have to be evidence-based as well. So clearly we often look at a scheme and then we kind of maybe modify it a few months in to make sure that we can provide support to businesses as well.
I think that's right. All I would add on the second point, because I think Phil's covered much of it, is that it's also worth us understanding as a local authority whether or not the statement you made is in fact, the basis of it is true in fact, whether or not those car journeys would have a major impact on takings of the business. I mean, there's an awful lot of evidence out there that people that actually come by foot and by bicycle spend more than people who come by car. And so I know a lot of traders are very nervous when we remove parking, or are very keen to see parking provided to support their trading. But a lot of the evidence doesn't suggest that actually it's really that detrimental to see that removal.
Okay. Is that about line bikes? Okay. Yes, sir. What can we do, please? If you can wait till the mic gets to you.
Yeah, a couple of contributions, Phil. First of all, do you provide business rate holidays for incoming businesses? And secondly, how hard are we marketing Teddington High Street and Broad Street for incoming businesses? An example, I have to go to Richmond, out of the town, Twickenham, to go to a travel agent's.
Yeah, I mean, I think that on your second point, look, I mean, the economy is changing in a number of areas. I mean, we've seen this with banks as well. The fact of the matter is there are fewer people using some of these services face to face and more doing things online. And I think holiday booking is an example of that. You know, we can't necessarily control where retailers basically want to make their choices in terms of location. And I think the example you made is one where, you know, retailers in the travel industry are suffering at the moment. And I think therefore you will see a natural consolidation. There's little that we can do in terms of being able to encourage. On your first point, I mean, I think that obviously business rates is something that is set centrally, and policies on business rates are set centrally. We have just been back to go through quite a big change on rateable values in the next 12 months, where a number of businesses are going to benefit from rateable value changes, and indeed even for those businesses where they might not, there are not holidays, but there are stepped up transitions which come into place as well. We've also got a team in the council who are helping to brief businesses on the implications of any rateable value changes as well, so they know the implications of that. On the final point on marketing, indeed, well, Broad Street in fact will be one of the targets of our Shop Local campaign this year as well. I can't remember the exact month we're focusing on Broad Street and Teddington in general, actually, but it will actually be one of those points where we're going to be more focusing in collaboration with the business and retail group there as well.
You know, there are a lot of very professional companies. When I've been involved in development, retail development, yeah, in the past, that's what you do. You know, you've got property that you want to let, and you target and market to those potential takers for your property.
Yeah, I fully understand that, but I think also you have to, I mean, I think we've also, one of the other things that's come through is that the nature of our high streets is changing. We're getting, one of the evidences we have, and when we did work for the local plan, is also that we understand that the mix of retailers, of food and beverage establishments, also of making sure that we've got some facilities on high streets for small businesses. We've just been opening a new enterprise centre in Twickenham as well for that reason. It's just a fact of how things change. And actually, as I mentioned before, we're not seeing, although you do see pockets, we're not seeing massive changes in terms of our overall vacancy rates. So our high streets in general aren't doing too badly, but they do have to move with the times in that case as well as markets change.
Thank you. I see we have one of our online viewers, Mr. Eldridge. We're about to unmute you, Mr. Eldridge.
Hiya, how's it going?
Oh, good, thank you.
Yeah, no, I submitted a question online and I'd love to follow it up with you guys. We've seen very recently a lot of parking restrictions being imposed on the streets that we and our nearby neighbours live on. We recently rejected a CPZ petition, but we seem to have lost about 20% of our local parking spaces within the past 2 weeks, which was not something that was run past us as residents. And it's causing a lot of issues for us. Particularly, we have a lot of young families here that now can't park near their homes, which is dangerous for young children. So I was wondering if you could give us any insight into what's going to be done to allow for the local community to still have available parking for the families that live in this area.
Okay, I'm guessing we're talking about the Stanley Road area. Are we? Would that be
Yeah,
guessing?
we're Stanley Road Gardens and also the local streets around here, so like Elm Tree Road and Stanley Road.
Okay,
yeah,
Alex Evans.
So the position's not one I'm unfamiliar with. You'll be pleased to know. I think the challenge. I mean, I'm going to sort of try and talk more generally, but with some reference to the specifics here, because I'm conscious that we're meant to stay away as much as we can from overly being focused on a given road or a given community. But the specifics of this situation were that we consulted back in October 21 on the CPZ introduction in this area, and then again in July 2022. And in the latter of those two consultations, we explained that the double yellow lines would be implemented irrespective of whether there was support for a CPZ. And the reason for that, just so people who aren't familiar with the road are concerned, is under the present configuration of parking, there isn't sufficient road width to allow a fire appliance to make its way the full length of that road. And in consultation with the London Fire Brigade, we have had to apply standards relating to that road that mean, given the position of a hydrant being actually at the entrance point and no access to one at the far end, that their appliance has to be able to make it to the full end without losing pressure on their appliance to pump water. So in short, it's deeply regrettable that we've had to remove the level of parking that we have. I have no personal desire to remove that, and neither do the officers working under my control. But this council must put the safety of our citizens ahead of parking amenity.
Oh yeah, we understand that, and so in that instance, have you made any sort of suggestion as to what the safety of moving people away from their homes, so that people with young families now have to move their children from parking maybe a street or 2 streets over to their homes, as opposed to the risks of there being a fire that a fire engine might need to have access to a fire hydrant, which is more important.
As a council, we've got a duty to act on the fire brigade's access requirements. For all that I wish to provide, and my colleagues here too, wish to provide the parking amenity that you and your neighbours want, that is secondary to the demands of the fire service.
So you're saying that my neighbours who have, twins under the age of 1, who can no longer park near to their home, will have to then leave their children in their car, and while they bring their other child back to their home, that's subservient to the requirements of having access to a fire hydrant in a street where there has not been a fire in 100 years.
With respect, Mr. Eldridge, my position on behalf of the council remains that those twins' safety from a fire is more important than whether or not they can park outside their house.
Yeah, so that kind of safety is more important than the safety of being left alone miles from their home.
Okay, I've got a gentleman in the audience who wishes to come in.
I'm a neighbour.
Oh, hello,
Mr. Eldridge, and I did submit a question which hasn't been brought up. In essence, it relates to the implementation of the double yellow lines in this area. I think many of the residents would understand potential fire risk and the need for access to the fire hydrants. We can see that requires a number of double yellow lines being implemented and a reduction in parking spaces. However, what we've seen is a significant reduction that is inconsistently applied, where yellow line lengths around corners and in certain areas, and Elm Tree Road, one end is a perfect example, where it's a very wide road and whole one side of double yellow lines have been removed. The question I'd submitted, and I understand your prioritisation, but what sort of capacity analysis had been taken, and why have so many yellow lines been extended in varying lengths in different positions that appear to have been implemented to always reduce additional parking spaces? It actually feels like this is something to drive us towards a CPZ that none of the residents actually believe is the solution. So the fundamental problem is we accept the potential requirement for that in some locations, but it's not being consistently applied. And I wandered streets last night where the same implementation has not occurred. So it's not consistent. And why have the yellow lines been extended in other areas to reduce the overall capacity so significantly?
Well, I'm not the traffic engineer that designs the scheme, but I have absolute confidence in the conversations I've had with the traffic engineers involved with this scheme, because I've pressed and asked and pressed again residents' instigation, ward councillors' instigation, for whether or not in any ways these design schemes are overbearing, whether there is a reduction that can be made. And I'm pretty confident that we're at the zenith of what is possible. In answer to your other question, what assessment's been made? Well, in a way, the assessment is irrelevant, because we can only provide what we can legally provide while maintaining the necessary widths for vehicles. And I would counter that. I mean, happy to continue the conversation by correspondence or indeed over the phone or face-to-face following this, but the roads that you've walked will not have identical geometries to this road. They will have similarities, but they won't be identical. So the fact that a road is lined differently road to road is because they present at different points in the road with different widths, with different demands, different utilities and different curb lines.
Yes, of course, but can we get the microphone? Because otherwise people like me who are a bit mutt can't hear what you're saying.
Thank you. And I again, I know the question has been raised by others online. I think fundamentally, as residents, we feel that the council should be considering us and looking after us. And I appreciate the fire regulations may be, one such example. However, it is absolutely clear to just about everybody on our road, nobody saw the double yellow lines as being implemented as part of the CPZ discussion. So all of a sudden we find a significant loss of parking, and we've had no opportunity, and partly due to the nature of the letters that were submitted, the drawings that were submitted, the language used, for us to actually actively participate and work with the council on a sensible solution that meets such fire regulations, but enables us to continue to park and live as residents. Because at this point in time, there's a lot of anguish within those streets around this implementation.
So look, I know and feel the anguish. Believe you me, I'm not oblivious to it. I received plenty of correspondence about it and engaged substantially over it. What I would say is, as I said in my earlier remarks, these schematics were set out in July 22 and did make clear whether the CPZ was implemented or not. The council had to make sure that fire appliance access was allowed. I'm very happy to continue the conversation, but all I would say, just to manage expectations, is I feel I have pressed a lot with officers. They ultimately are the experts in designing what's necessary. And unless we've missed something, which is possible, I'm sadly of the view that the level of parking loss is the minimum that we're able to get away with while maintaining fire access.
And so, sorry, just to confirm what you're saying, is this a legal requirement?
We are under a duty to act on fire service advice, yes, and to put it differently anyway, regardless of its legality, it would be unconscionable for this council to act against the advice of the London Fire Brigade.
So you're saying that this is something that you legally have to.
I've said what I've said repeatedly, Mr. Elvin. I do feel like I'm being hectored a little here.
Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. That's fine. That's your job as a councillor to be hectored. Are you saying that this is a legal requirement or something that you should do under consideration from the residents who you are set to represent?
I'll say it one more. I'll say it in a different form, but as best I can. The council's primary duty is to assist with public safety. We cannot subjugate public safety to other lesser priorities.
This is what we're saying, is that by reducing the parking for the local community, you're placing local residents at risk, and that is a public safety concern.
Mr. Eldridge, if I may, just one moment. There's a lot of exasperation here in the hall because there's a lot of butting in. There are other people on the Zoom who've got their hand raised, and one person in the hall who also has their hand raised. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come to them, and then I'm going to offer a suggestion. But the one thing which I will say, it is not a councillor's job to be hectored. It's a councillor's job to try to offer honest answers, but it is not their job to be hectored. Charlotte, if we can get the microphone down to the back.
Just taking a step back, I find this conversation slightly dystopian in some ways, that we're even discussing the trade-off between fire safety access and car parking. Like, if that was your family in a burning building, I feel like you really would much rather the fire service could have access to save their lives than actually where you park your car. And I do think that this is emblematic of an issue we have in this borough more widely, which is that, you know, residents often feel that they have some sort of right to park their vehicle outside their property, when actually, unless you have a gated development with allocated parking, you actually don't have the God-given right to park your car outside your property. And lots of families in this borough convey and transport their whole family without a car. Lots of people can't actually afford to own and run a vehicle in this cost of living crisis. And therefore, you know, the idea that it's somehow dangerous that you have to take your child from the next street to your home, when plenty of families don't have the privilege of conveying their child by car, the whole argument just seems like, if we take a step back, you know, and the amount of anguish and actually the abuse, I think, that's been levelled at councillors tonight is completely disproportionate to this issue, you know, in terms of the safety concerns that have been expressed. And I find it quite disturbing, actually, if I'm honest.
Thank you. I did see I did see another hand raised online. I don't know whether that's gone away. Hang on. Emily B, also on Stanley Road, has got a hand raised. Are you there? No.
Hi. Hello. Yes.
Hello. Good.
Thank you. I'm the mum of the twins that Phil was talking about, and I have a 3-year-old.
Okay. No, please.
Of course.
It's a conversation, so everybody has the right to be heard. Sorry, but
Absolutely.
I know. Yeah.
And I absolutely would want a fire engine to be able to reach our house. And I did see a fire engine drive down our road last year. But I totally respect that the fire service need to have access to our street. I also, every day, have to choose which child I leave alone in a car 2 streets away, and which one of my 3-year-old and my 2 7-month-old twins, which ones I bring in, which ones I then leave together inside. I don't expect to park outside my front door. I did buy this house thinking, oh, at last, you know, having moved from somewhere where we had to park streets away before we had 3 children. At last, we might be able to park within a few minutes walk. I think that we shouldn't be debating fire safety or parking. What we should be looking at is how can we work towards both. Of course, we need the fire safety, but surely it's the duty of the council to then say, okay, we've had to take away so many spaces on this road. Where else can we open up opportunities for people to park their cars so that they don't have to leave? And I also appreciate some people don't have the privilege of being able to drive a car. That at the moment for me would mean I never left the house, and I know that's true for some people. But I'm just talking from from the situation I find myself in, and many of our neighbours find ourselves in right now. And some people, you know, have other access needs that mean they need to use whatever vehicles they can.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to bring Alex in, but I did promise a suggestion which may help. Don't know whether it will. Sometimes when we put these schemes in, once they're in, we then invite the fire chief down to have a look. If they say that that's what's needed, then that's what's needed. But sometimes they might say, all right, you can maybe free something up there. If the fire chief or a representative of the fire chief comes along and has a look and said, no, this is the minimum that we need, would that satisfy you? Okay.
I think we just want an opportunity to understand that logic, sharing the decisions, and just to, you know, I can feel the emotion from the rest of the audience here. And this isn't about being demanding to park outside a road. The implementation of the local CPZ and the double yellow line, there will be nowhere to park many people returning, for example, late at night. I'm not sure where we will end up going. It could be a mile away. That's the sort of thing we're talking about. I cycle, use the public transport. Occasionally I need to use my.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Look, all I say on this, look, I've said it earlier, but let me, you know, say it again for the avoidance of doubt. I'm absolutely empathetic and sympathetic to the concerns expressed. You know, doing this job, it gives me no pleasure in having to have a role in the removal of level of parking that has been necessary here. And to Emily's point, look, I feel and hear you. I've got 2 twin boys and an older boy, and I've lived on a terrace street with limited parking where I've had to do similar things. I can see it's deeply undesirable. And I think in terms of your ask, again, I'd like to assist. The problem is, it is an area of high parking stress, which is why we've got a controlled parking zone coming in. Really, the best I can offer you is that from a council standpoint, we don't eliminate any parking that we don't have to, and that we hope very much that the controlled parking regime will have a beneficial impact. I think as Councillor Roberts has said, and I mean almost anticipatory of the point, we will look at this in a much shorter time scale than we would typically. We'd look at this, typically a CPZ we'd look at after 6 to 12 months. We will look specifically at this road and some of the other roads that have some specific problems after 3 months. And of course, we'll involve the fire brigade again and see if there are further concessions that can be made. I do believe, no, I don't believe. What I know from experience with CPZs, regardless of the specifics of this road, is that often the concerns about operation exceed the reality of the impacts. And I hope that that will indeed be the case here.
Okay. Thank you for that, and thank you for everybody that wants to speak. I've got such a lot of questions to get through, and I could be on Stanley Gardens all night. Yeah. And there's been a lot of talk at this end of the table, but frankly, this end of the table.
Like what you're suggesting is that you'll have the fire service.
Okay, so we're going to move on. Shona Williams. Shona Williams, and hello, there we are. You have a question for Councillor Millard. This one is about housing, so.
I can vaguely remember, but if somebody could.
Would you like me to? I happily to. What can be done to prevent flats in new developments being sold to people who do not intend to live in them or become part of the local community, but to let them to often short-term tenants? Yes.
A number of the new development. I'm from Kew. A number of the new developments are like ghost towns, and there is no sense of community. You can walk down some of these corridors with flats, and there's just no sign of life at all. And surely we should be providing housing for people who really want to live here.
Absolutely, 100%. Thank you, Shona. I think it's terribly important. There's 2 things that we're talking about here, and I think it'd be good to identify both of them. What you've just mentioned is perhaps people investing and not occupying the homes, which is a real problem across London, and particularly with foreign investors. As Sadiq Khan, the mayor, has said, you know, London is, to a large extent, a repository for some of the dirtiest money on the planet. and it's in property. I'm not saying that's what's happening in Kew, and I think that's largely confined to central London. Westminster has the highest, and also interestingly Hounslow, but not Richmond. But we do have, you know, we are very, very aware of the pressures on housing, and we're very keen to not see empty homes. We have an empty homes officer what's it called when you employ someone for the first time? Recruited. Thank you. Brain fog. I apologise. Recruited an empty homes officer who's about to start, so we can pick up our programme, which has already resulted in quite a few empty homes being turned around and returned to occupation, and we'll continue with that. It's very important to us to see that being kept to a minimum. You did also mention what can be done about people buying flats and then letting them out to people, which is a slightly different thing. I mean, where the market rent is concerned, we don't have much control over what happens with private developments on that level, but certainly with things that the council's involved in, such as affordable rent as part of the affordable housing on developments, it's very important. It's not legal for someone to sublet their flat unless there are exceptional circumstances that have been agreed with the housing association in advance. And our fraud partnership will investigate all of those and make sure that that isn't happening wherever possible. Did you want to ask anything further, Shona?
That's my job.
Sorry.
Shona, do you have a supplementary question you would like to ask?
I feel it's very sad that we are, that lots of people want to actually come. And I feel that a lot of people love to live in this area, but don't want to live in yet another flat with huge service charges. So the policy seems to be high density flats in increasingly higher buildings. I just feel it is very sad that we are ticking boxes by building homes, but we're not actually satisfying a need of people who really want to live here.
Thank you. Oh, go on.
Absolutely. Well, I think just briefly to come back, you know, absolutely, it's incredibly important. I think affordable homes are a very important part of that as well. You know, it's a wonderful borough, and as you say, lots of people want to live here, and the value of property to rent and to buy reflects that. And it's a fact that the people on lower incomes are finding it harder and harder to live here, and that's people who are doing some of the most important jobs in our wonderful community: policemen, social workers, teachers. We need them to be able to live here, and we need to make retain our wonderful community by ensuring we do provide as much affordable housing as possible. That's an absolutely central concern of this council, and our new local plan enshrines tougher measures to ensure that we get the most affordable housing we can from developers. Our local plan doesn't encourage high-rise building. Sometimes things are called in by higher powers and stories are added with great controversy. We won't go into that, but it does affect your local area. So do mention, if you've got specific places you think are empty, please do tell your local ward councillors. Their emails are on the website of the council, and we will get our empty homes officer onto it. Thank you.
Thank you. Different question now with a different response. What Piers Allen doesn't know about public health is not worth knowing. And the question we have is from Barbara Biles. Is Barbara here? But it's such a good question, I'm going to ask it anyway. Oh, you're there. Are you online? Oh, no, you're there. Sorry. Hello. Do you remember what your question was, Barbara?
Vaguely,
Yeah, that's good.
I was concerned that we don't have adequate individual seating in high streets or anywhere like that, where, you know, with the increasing heat that we had last, that people can just stop for seconds. It's only go from one shop to another, take a short break, and it will bring people back into the community, back into the shop, etc. I have bought pictures of it, you know, from another country where I was at my door, and it does definitely people in, because obviously they can sit for 2 or 3 minutes they're not sharing, you know, 3 or 4 seater bench, you know, with someone they don't want to sit with.
Excellent. Street seating. Thank you.
So there is actually a local initiative that's actually been going since about 2005 called Sit Stop, that work with local businesses and other public places to actually try and introduce seating. Businesses actually can provide seating, and you just have to ask and so on, and you'll get a seat. We also have some other initiatives. I know Rules do a friendship bench, which are trying to roll out more of them, and so on, areas where of open space where people perhaps just want to sort of sit and contemplate. I know in my own ward, actually, we're working with the highways department to actually have a number of benches up the Meadway towards Neighbourhood Gardens, which is our local park, because we know that certain residents and so on need a rest stop on the way to the park. It's a friendly park that encourages accessibility and so on, and we actually want more people to use it. So what I would say is, do have a word with your local ward councillors who may already know of initiatives. Do actually look at the Sit Stop website. You can actually join. I think there are over 100 places where there are these initiatives that they put in place, and you can see them actually all listed on their website. But do approach your ward councillor, and we'll find ways and so on of trying to introduce more seating and so on. You know, we are a more elderly population in terms of growth, so I think the need for this is very apparent and so on. So let's try and work together and so on with, you know, if you know what areas where people actually really would like more seating, let your ward councillors know, and we'll try and find the best way of providing that.
Okay, thank you. And one thing which I take up on a regular basis when I get the opportunity is the lack of places to sit on railway station platforms, which, you know, 3 benches for a half a mile of platform is outrageous. But we have a different question now. We're going to hear from Councillor Baldwin, who we've not heard from yet. This is from Scotty McLeod. Not sure if Scotty is online. He's certainly not in the room. You couldn't get through. Okay, so Scotty's question is, Scotty is a powered wheelchair user, for those of you who don't know Scotty. So the question is, what is being done to improve accessibility in the borough?
Hi, Scotty. It's been a long time. Anyway, oh goodness, there are so many things that we're trying to do with the accessibility. There's the entire project that we're doing with Southwest Rail, trying to get more and more accessible train stations. I think Hampton, Wick, and Barnes are the next ones online to have lifts put in, so there's more accessibility that way. When you say accessibility, can you tell me if was there a specific area that you were? No, sorry, Scotty, but in terms of accessibility,
I think it's for
street furniture and stuff.
Possibly, and I think it's also to ensure that those people who are wheelchair users in the borough are able to, you know, navigate their way around. Just on a point of factual correction, sorry, Teddington and Barnes are the stations which are getting the lifts.
Oh, and Hampton Wick
is on the list.
On the list, well, so's North Sheen, we're 14, we're hoping. Anyway, Scotty, so yes, we're always keeping that in mind in terms of street furniture, and I think that's really more for Councillor Needham Watson, for Councillor Amon. They know about the removal of street furniture. And I know that when we are looking at things like crossings and such, then we are doing a lot more in terms of making sure that they are appropriate for people with wheelchairs. But we're also making sure that they're accessible to people who are partially sighted as well. Indeed. And I hope that answers most of it. But Scotty, if you'd like to write to me, I'm more than happy to give you a much longer written response as well.
Can I add something?
Yes, of course.
Okay. We do actually have a quite a good partnership with an organisation called Access Able, and they've actually now provided access guides to over 200 places in the borough that give information about available parking, accessible toilets, whether places are accessible to powered wheelchairs and so on. So you know, we're obviously year by year trying to encourage them to do more places and so on, but do make use of that, access able and so on. Websites, an app. It really does try and make all our places in Richmond more inclusive and accessible.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going through my list. So we've dealt with the issue of double yellow lines in Teddington, I think. I think that's been sorted. We'll move on to what gives you confidence. I believe this is from Mr. Nick Dexter. What gives you confidence that affordable housing will be delivered? Also, what is being done to address the shortage of social housing? Jim Millard.
Thank you for asking that question. I touched on this earlier, the importance of affordable housing to this administration. And we've literally set out an expectation by assessing and collating all the schemes, all the major schemes that we're working on in conjunction with developers and housing associations in the borough that are either in preparation to be brought to planning or have indeed had planning permission granted. And that amounts to currently over 1,000 affordable homes to be delivered over the next few years in the borough. And it goes on and it increases. And as I said, we beefed up our local plan, which makes it very clear that if people want to develop private schemes in this borough, they are expected to deliver a significant proportion of affordable housing. And, you know, we're looking at probably around 500 starts on site within the next 3 years. It's, you know, we took control of this administration in 2018. It takes, you know, we'd love to have immediately caused affordable housing to spring up, but it takes years. Housing doesn't fit into an electoral cycle. And this year, which has just started, this financial year, we'll be seeing a large increase in the number of completions compared to previous years of affordable housing, I'm pleased to say.
Excellent.
Why don't you?
Ah, you're there.
Yes. Why don't you publish the detail that gets up to 1,000 homes and consider it more than once a year?
Thanks, Nick. Yes, we will be publishing it soon at our forthcoming Adult Social Services Health and Housing Committee. We'll have a full report on the affordable housing that's coming forth in the borough.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
I'm conscious of the time. It's 15:15, and we did say we need to finish spot on 2:45, and there's lots of questions we need to get through. So I'm going to come to a different one. But Alex Eamon's back up for batting here again. Tim Harrington. Is Tim here? No, I'm going to ask a question because it's a useful question. It's about QR codes, of which we are now all familiar. Who would have thought we'd be doing QR codes again? Would you consider introducing a mandatory QR code for all temporary roadworks, which would link to the owner's details so that residents can quickly access more information about the roadworks which are happening?
I will certainly ask officers, but my instinct is that that is not going to be possible because the rules that govern utility access to our road network are set by national legislation, and the requirements therein apply from national government law. I'm not sure that we have powers as a local authority to add to those requirements. It may be possible that we can encourage.
Yep.
But mandate, I'm sceptical we have that ability. As I say, I'll take it away.
Excellent. Mr. Harrington is being, you know, a fountain of good questions. So I'm going to take this one. This is for Julia. It's something which you will all be interested in, I'm sure. Would you consider opening, running and maintaining public toilets close to Richmond Riverside, Kew Green, Riverside and or Old Deer Park? I'm sure that this is not a prescriptive list.
What, me personally or the council?
Well, you know, one of those ladies who gets outside in
quite
friends.
good, actually. I did a stint in my youth as a general assistant in a hotel in North Wales, and I was quite skilled at cleaning toilets. So you never know, could be an opening for me there. But to take this seriously, I think we realise increasingly and acknowledge the importance of toilet provision as an equality issue and as a health issue. And certainly Councillor Allen and I have had discussions about this. And I went to speak to the health committee at the GLA last year on this subject, and there's an acknowledgement across London that it's something we need to tackle. Richmond is a pioneer in its community toilet scheme. It's not a perfect scheme. It basically, the council pays modest sums of money to businesses and organisations dotted around the borough to provide access to their what would otherwise be a private toilet, a toilet in a cafe, that allows you to go into the cafe, but you don't have to purchase a coffee. Perhaps not enough people know about that. So, you know, there's a lesson there around accessing that information. I believe we're getting a paper to the Environment Committee about this. The Policy and Performance Review Board that Councillor Amon mentioned just a while back is a sort of overarching board of councillors that we have that can sort of do deep dives into certain areas of policy and performance, and community toilets is one that they're looking at and coming back with recommendations, and one of them is certainly about better mapping, better sharing of information to people who want to just take a short trip to their local town centre but are anxious about doing so because of not knowing where the toilets are, or visitors to the borough. And as I said, it's an equality and an accessibility issue. So we want to do a bit of work on it and try and get more businesses and local organisations involved, and to improve the knowledge about the scheme. So the specific question about Richmond, Riverside, Town Centre and Green area, we realised during lockdown, of course, that our borough and the parks are incredibly popular for people who couldn't do anything except go to a park. Well, they came to our parks and they used them for good purposes and unpleasant ones as well. And we did take the decision to put temporary toilets on Richmond Green and a couple of other locations, but that was never going to be a long-term solution because of the not terribly sightly appearance of the toilets, and it just wasn't going to work long term. But we continue to look at things we could do in Richmond town. We would certainly like to improve the toilets at the library, the lending library in Richmond, which is a very central location within Richmond, but doesn't have publicly accessible toilets at the moment. So that's one thing that we're looking at as a good option potentially, and we're open-minded about how we improve toilet provision in the borough. But yes, it's certainly something that's on our list of to-do things. Again, I'm rambling on now, so I'm going to stop.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I saw Hester online, the hand raised. Was that in direct relation to toilets, Hester?
Yes, it was.
Excellent.
You know, you're concentrating your answer on Richmond, but Twickenham also has a very large open space, and it's all very well actually wanting to go and use a toilet within a public coffee shop or such like, or a public area, because there's a lot of places. It's the open spaces that have the problem.
Yep.
Yes, indeed. And sorry, I did concentrate rather on Richmond because that's discussions that we've been having recently. You're right. I think I'll bring this back to the importance of mapping out the locations where there are publicly accessible toilets. I don't think it's going to be the council by itself that meets the need of people visiting parks, although in some of our parks we do have toilets that are accessible. We also have partners in the borough, such as Marble Hill House, which has accessible toilets in Twickenham. We also have great hopes, as many of you will know, for the site just around the corner, the derelict bath site that we call the Twickenham Riverside site, and we very much hope to see development come forward on that site, and that will include additional toilets. Obviously, that's some way off. But I think the message for me there is we need to get much better at explaining to people where there are toilets that they can use that may not be as far away as they think. So that's a good point for me to take away, I think.
Thank you. Robin Cairns, I see his hand up.
Excuse the pun, but I thought this whole idea dried up. I haven't seen a welcome toilet sticker in a shop or facility for a long time. And also, I didn't know it was a bribing initiative. You're paying them to
encourage the people to come into their premises.
Inducement, I think, is inducement rather than bribe. Yes.
Okay. Well, I would have thought the incentive would be to get customers into the premises anyway to use the toilets. Then they might spend money, like the cash point machine in Costco near us, for example.
Indeed. It's a fair point, and I try to buy pints whenever I go into a public house. You're very selfless. Sir at the front.
Can I?
A bit further away. There we go. Just a bit
Can
further.
I change the theme to the sport? Just because we didn't talk about the sport. Here in Richmond, particularly in South Richmond ward, there is no at all table tennis, outdoor table tennis. Do you suggest do you consider to add a few outdoor table tennis in the park, in Green Park, for example?
Richmond Green, I think.
Well, I can't make any promises here and now that I can't keep. Sport actually comes on the Environment, Sustainability, Culture and Sport Committee, as you'd expect. And I have a colleague, Alan Durrance, who leads on sports issues, but I'll certainly have a chat with him. I quite like the idea of outdoor table tennis tables. I think that's what you mean. So find spaces in parks for table tennis. Have I understood that, or have I misheard you? Does he say table tennis?
Table tennis. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, there is no lot of space for place a couple of table tennis. Yeah, but only one. Where is it on the North Sheen Garden, and it's quietly fluid in the mud. It's not possible to use this table.
And I'd really like to follow up on this because I can see the beauty of table tennis. It is that it's very accessible to people. You don't need a great deal of space, but perhaps that's if I can get my email address to you and we can have a conversation about that, which I can then circulate to colleagues who can help. Yeah.
I've got Priya Samuel here. I don't think I've planted these people in the audience because I keep asking for them by name. I just know a lot of people. Priya.
Thank you. And I guess this is the beauty of the diversity of residents from Richmond. So I'm a non-exec director for Table Tennis England. So I can connect directly on that. So maybe if we could just have a three-way chat and we'll get that going.
Okay. Can you clear up whether it's table tennis or ping pong, or are they different?
They're one and the same. However, there is an initiative called Ping. So there's lots of different things we could do for different members of our community. So happy to talk to whoever I need to.
Excellent. We're here to educate, entertain and inform folks.
I'm assuming she's a table member rather than a board member.
Oh, thank you very much.
And there's no pong.
We've got table tennis. And it's got a place. Yeah.
But don't leave any litter.
No,
yeah.
No, TW2.
I'm going to move off the subject of sports and ping pong. I'm going to bring in Robin Brown on a question which has been asked. Again, it's about council tax. He does do other things than council tax, but the question is a reasonable one, and it's why does the council not push back against the GLA element of the council tax imposition?
Thank you. Well, we're probably a bit caught here between the government and the London Mayor in reality. So the GLA precept went up by about £38. Of that, £15 was for funding the police in London and £20 was for TfL. Now, there's clearly, there's funding debates about how our police are funded and how much is funded nationally versus by local authorities, and the same applies to TfL. TfL's finances are in a very difficult place. So in a sense, you're a bit caught because we don't really want the GLA premium to go up significantly, but equally, we don't necessarily also want to be in a position where we feel we're arguing against police on our streets, because we're actually campaigning for more local neighbourhood police in our area, and we're pleased to see that the Met are talking that game now, at least. So let's hope that we see some action on that front. And of course, TfL's finances, we know, are under huge pressure. They're under pressure anyway, and they got under particular pressure because of the pandemic. And they're really in a very difficult place. And there's a debate going on between the mayor and the government essentially about how TfL is funded. And of course, part of that is now bouncing back on onto council taxpayers. The other small element is for fire, £3.70 on fire. So the short answer is we don't particularly like it. The government has allowed the mayor to do that. So the government sets caps for council tax. They cap how much Richmond can increase council tax by. So they've basically given the green light to the mayor to do this. It's not great for residents, but we do need more police, and we do also need a TfL that works.
Okay, so thank you for that. Next question. I'm going to take one from the board. One for Julia. Back to bins. Why do we bother separating kitchen waste when it is tipped in with the general waste on collection day?
Right. So
how long have you got?
I've got 15 minutes. Yeah, this is something quite close to my heart, and I understand only too well how disheartening it is if you've separated your food waste to see it not being handled correctly. I would urge residents, if you see that happening in your street, you can either fill in a web form and say it's not been collected right, or you can email me, and I will take it up with officers, because we can work with our contractor Serco in terms of training their operatives to understand why it's important to separate out the food waste. And we need that level of engagement to make sure that they're supporting us. The importance of food waste is, firstly, what we should do is reduce the food we waste. That's the environmental thing to do. But inevitably, some food waste arises, and we have a system in Richmond to collect it for many properties, not all, although we are expanding to more and more communal properties. Food waste makes up over 30% of the waste that we have in our black sack waste. It's more expensive for the borough to dispose of it. It costs about £100 a tonne, more than £100 a tonne, to dispose of what we call residual waste that comes in black sacks. By contrast, it's only just over £10 per tonne to dispose of food waste. I've mentioned the environmental impact of food that is grown and then isn't eaten. It's a huge impact, and it's quite an offensive impact when you think of the number of people who go hungry, who need to use food banks, who rely on receiving food. So in my mind, it is part of the same equation. We need to look across the board at how we handle food. We need to have those conversations with our contractor so they understand we're not just asking for it for the sake of it, but they understand we need to keep it separate. I feel quite passionate about it. I sense that I'm not as articulating this as well as I would want, but I can't stress how much I need your help. If you see it going wrong, I can only help put it right if I know about it. So it's really, really important that you let me know where that's happening, if it is happening. We have taken this up on numerous occasions with Serco, and they have implemented additional training and talks with their crews. We also know that they've implemented disciplinary procedures with some crew members for not handling the waste correctly. We take it extremely seriously. It's really important for us as an administration. It's important for you as residents when you've done the hard work. So let me know where it's going wrong, and we'll try and put it right.
Thank you. The lady has her hand raised for a very quick supplementary.
Actually, that question's from me. I didn't.
Excellent, excellent.
This is me.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah. Oh gosh, what was I going to say now? The bins that the foxes are able to look over, open. That's how they do it. I've seen it now. And the people who do collect the waste throw the back wherever, on top of flowers in my garden, that kind of thing too. But cats and and it's just a general idea that's
Okay. I'm sorry that you're experiencing that. We've got 10 minutes. We can move on to different subjects, but if there's specific things that people desperately want to raise about bins, I can see this gentleman here very quickly, then this lady here very quickly.
Just a quick one on the question of food waste. In the summer, we often see surplus food in road and gardens and things. Is there any scheme for helping us find good homes for surplus food like that?
Oh, Nancy knows the answer to this. Nancy is going to answer it very quickly.
I am going to answer it very quickly. All of the food banks and the Real Junk Food Projects are two wonderful voluntary sector organizations who will take your garden excess and put it to a good use. So Real Junk Food, they actually cook the food and distribute it to people who in need, but also as part of the food bank offering.
Excellent, thank you. Lady in the front, and then we'll move on to a different subject.
I'd like to ask where the council has its recycling done. Is any of it sent abroad? And if so, is the council reassured that it's managed safely?
Good question.
I would direct you back to richmond.gov.uk website, where there is quite a lot of information about where recycling streams go. Most of it is dealt with within Europe. I understand some of it goes to Turkey. And I've asked officers previously on this point, because it's something that comes up from time to time when we see things on the BBC about plastics being irresponsibly disposed of, for example. And it's something that's important to residents, that when they're doing their recycling, that it does get recycled. I'm happy with the assurances that I've received, but it's always worth checking up that we're still confident that our onward systems are working well. And I'm happy to take that up. As I say, a waste officer is in the room, and I will check with her to make sure that the information that's on our website is reflecting reality as far as is possible for us to do.
Okay, it is 8:36. I see that John Rolls is in the room. I can't find your question, Mr. Rolls. You asked one about village plans. Now, I'm sure that you've got the question with you. Good man.
Previously, council used to have village planning process area, and this involved however, it seems to have been dropped over the 22. Could we go back to the system? The council engages with local communities and has action area.
Now, because this covers both planning and communities, you're going to get a double whammy. So Julia's going to answer, and so is Nancy.
Yeah. So we have village plans, which are supplementary planning documents that still exist. You can see them all listed on that famous richmond.gov website if you search for SPDs. They sort of adopted the village character in an attempt to sort of add something to the local plan system. My more experienced colleagues think that perhaps they don't add very much to the planning process, but be that as it may, I think that your question perhaps speaks to something slightly different from that, which is the actual engagement with communities to have a say in what's going on in your community. We're engaged at the moment in writing our new local plan, and I know that you know that, and I think you've probably even read the draft, which is going to come to Environment Committee later in April and then on to full council. And we have an extensive programme of engagement around that consultation. Whether we can do more to work with our communities to understand their desires and their vision for their own area is perhaps something that Councillor Baldwin might want to pick up on how we best engage on aspirations for local areas.
Okay, Mr. Rolls, I feel disconcerting that I can't actually see you, but that's all right.
There we go.
Oh, hi. The things that we are going to do, obviously, we have these big community conversations from time to time, and we will have, we have done in the past, had consultations around town center planning, that sort of thing. And there's no reason why we wouldn't be able to do something borough-wide with that. But more importantly, and I think answering your question more specifically, is that we will be having what I like to call area conversations. And that's where we take wards and we put them together. So in one instance, it would be Kew, North Richmond, South Richmond. And we talk to the residents and see what it is that what their aspirations are for our area and what are some of the concerns that they have. And that's always a really good place to feed that kind of thing in.
Okay, does that answer your question, Mr. Rolls?
The thing is that the local plan, how it's currently set up, is that each area is divided into villages, and there used to be a village plan. Every single that's been deleted off the council website. You go into the committee minutes and see the old plans that they are separate. The special plan. And it's like a halfway house between having a neighbourhood plan, which Petersham, that one area getting a lot better engagement, much more say where it's run, whereas the other parts of the borough, that halfway house has fallen. Feel that need to very closely. Government's looking at making every local authority in the country neighbourhood planning statements. I feel that we need to have more localism. It's all very well having a meeting here for the whole borough, but there's lots of people who can't come along.
No, but this is one of the reasons why this is not the only, and I'm sure that Nancy can add to this, but this is not why we don't just do this. We are maintaining the local area consultation meetings or the community conversations, whichever you wish to call them, so that people can put their questions directly to their ward councillors and discuss things with their neighbours. You may remember that in the previous administration, the idea was that there was effectively the cabinet, as it was then, went around the various areas and people were able to ask them questions, which didn't feel particularly connected because you weren't able to address questions to your ward representatives in open forum. We got rid of that and reinstated the original concept of being able to question your councillor. We'd like more people to come along, of course we would. But that can only happen if more people are feeling it's a benefit. In terms of whether we abolish villages, we didn't abolish villages, but in terms of Richmond Town Centre, for example, was designated a village. It's got 3 cinemas, 2 theatres, a mainline railway station, an underground station, an overground station, about a dozen churches, twice as many pubs. That ain't a village. So we just got rid of the concept of villages, but not the concept of community. Nancy? Sorry.
You said it so beautifully and so succinctly. I couldn't possibly improve, but I think what you're mistaking is you're using the word village, and what we're trying to establish is a sense of place. And I think that's the real place making. And whether you call it a village or a hamlet or a city center, it is coming up with something that is appropriate for that area. And that's where our local area conversations, which we will be having and coming up in the next few months, we'll be getting some schedules up soon. And that's where these places, these topics can be covered.
Gentleman has his hand raised. Next, Mr. Is this on this subject?
Unrelated, but I'm going to link it.
That's fair enough. You do your best. Here we go.
One of the things about place and having a sense of place, you can't enjoy it if you're not healthy. So, well, my question, and I kind of wanted to sneak it in because I didn't know if you would get to it, is what are the council's plans to continue to support the community's physical and mental health, but specifically in a holistic manner? How can health professionals such as myself get involved with the council to help support the whole community in a holistic manner? So there's that support spectrum, and I've already started doing this personally by running talks at my local community centres, but I want to just know what you guys are doing and basically how I and people like me get involved more.
Excellent. Piers Allen.
Okay. Well, we very much are about tackling health inequalities as they're called, but really using our community assets to work with organisations like our public health department and also our health partners. So in trying to address these things, we very much want to work with our community and voluntary sector partners. So you know, talking through your local community is a really important part of it. But what we really want to do, and there is certainly a great appetite and so on, is to actually get. Unfortunately, our public health grant in Richmond, for complex reasons, isn't where we would like it to be. But what we're trying to do is actually work with our health partners who absolutely do understand that we have to try and tackle things on a population management level and actually look at prevention. And if we actually keep people well, then they're going to perhaps use our health services less intensively, which is a benefit, you know, to our even our acute hospitals and so on, who are trying to not be so heavily used as they are at the moment. So please keep on having conversations. There will be some community conversations about how we develop this and so on. But it very much is both at the level of localities. That's the way that the new integrated care system is working and so on. We work at place at borough level. We work at South West London level. But we're increasingly trying to work at integrated community teams levels, which is localities around 30 to 50,000, maybe a couple of wards, working with all the partners in there, health partners, GPs, where we have existing social care organisations working together, and crucially the voluntary and community sector. So that's a developing piece and so on. But keep talking to us, because we really do want to work with organisations such as yourself.
Thank you. And I'm sure, sir, if you find Piers' email on the council website, richmond.gov.uk, may have been mentioned once or twice this evening, he'll be delighted to hear more from you. The time is now 47 minutes past. So even though I can see hands raised, I do apologise. I can't take any more questions, because I did say that we would be closing up promptly, and that's a politician's promise for you, broken already. So thank you to all of you who came along. Thank you to my colleagues here on the panel. They have been listening to what you've got to say. In the audience, you may not have realised there have been senior members of the administration, including the council's chief executive and the chief executive of Achieving for Children, who is our children's services offer. So they are listening to what you said. There have been other councillors in the room, like Councillor Millam, Councillor Bennett. I saw Councillor Wren, Councillor Fleming is in here. So we do want to keep hearing from what you've got to say. We'll be here for a little while longer if you want to come and buttonhole us, but not for too long, because I wish to go and support independent local businesses very shortly, for a drinky. So thank you very much for coming, and do come along next time we hold another community conversation. Thank you.